Harry K. Daghlian Jr. On the evening of August 21st, 1945, 23-year-old physicist Harry K. Daghlian Jr. entered a quiet laboratory at the Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico. World War II had just ended, but the race to understand the atomic nucleus was only beginning. Daghlian, a brilliant but young member of the Manhattan Project, was conducting an experiment to measure how close a plutonium core could come to achieving a self-sustaining chain reaction. The experiment required carefully stacking tungsten carbide bricks around a plutonium sphere. Each brick reflected neutrons, bringing the system closer to criticality. Working alone, Daghlian had nearly completed the assembly when, at 9:55 p.m., he accidentally dropped one of the heavy bricks directly onto the core. In that instant, the air filled with a brilliant blue flash, Cherenkov radiation, as the system went supercritical. A surge of invisible neutrons flooded the room. Realizing what had happened, Daghlian instinctively reached in and pulled bricks away with his bare hands to stop the reaction. But it was already too late. He had received a massive, lethal dose of radiation. Within minutes, he felt a tingling in his hand. Hours later, nausea and fatigue set in. Over the next 25 days, his condition deteriorated rapidly. His hand became blistered and necrotic, his internal organs failed, and his white blood cell count plummeted. He joked with doctors at first, calling himself the hottest man in the world, but his humor faded as his body decayed from within. On September 15, 1945, Harry Daghlian died from acute radiation syndrome, the first person in history to die from a nuclear criticality accident. His death shocked Los Alamos. The experiment was deemed too dangerous to repeat by hand. New safety rules were drafted requiring remote handling equipment, distance barriers, and multiple observers. Harry's accident would mark the beginning of nuclear safety protocols that continue to this day. Louis Alexander Slotin. Less than a year later, on May 21, 1946, tragedy struck again, this time claiming Louis Alexander Slotin, a 35-year-old Canadian physicist and one of the leading hands-on experts in criticality testing. Slotin's task was to demonstrate how to bring a plutonium core, the same one that killed Daghlian, to the edge of criticality using two beryllium hemispheres as neutron reflectors. The halves were separated by the thin blade of a screwdriver, a makeshift spacer that prevented the pieces from fully enclosing the core. It was a dangerous, improvised method Slotin had done dozens of times before, despite official disapproval. At 3:20 p.m., in front of 7 colleagues, the screwdriver slipped. The hemispheres closed. The plutonium went prompt critical. A brilliant blue flash filled the room, followed by a wave of heat and invisible radiation. Slotin immediately knocked the top hemisphere away, shielding his coworkers from the worst of the exposure, but receiving a fatal dose himself. He staggered back and muttered, "Well, that does it." He had saved everyone else, but his own life was already over. Within hours, Slotin was vomiting uncontrollably. Over the next 9 days, his body disintegrated from radiation poisoning, blistered skin, falling hair, internal bleeding, and massive infection. His colleagues watched helplessly as the strongest man in the lab wasted away. On May 30th, 1946, Louis Slotin died in agony, 9 days after the accident. He became known as the second victim of the Demon Core. His death ended all hands-on criticality testing at Los Alamos. From that day forward, no physicist would ever again stand next to a live plutonium core. Khlil Kimi. On July 21, 2022, 32-year-old Khlil Kimi was attending a company pool party at a luxury villa in Karmeh Yosef, Israel, a quiet town nestled among vineyards between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. Dozens of guests relaxed in the sun, music played, and laughter echoed over the blue water. Then, without warning, the ground gave way. A massive sinkhole, 13 meters deep, suddenly opened beneath the swimming pool. Water, floats, and partygoers were swallowed into the void in seconds. Videos captured the horrifying moment as the pool drained like a whirlpool, dragging everything down with it. Khlil was pulled under and disappeared. Rescue crews rushed to the scene, cutting through debris and pumping water from the pit. For 4 hours they searched before finding his body trapped deep inside the collapsed earth. Investigations revealed that the pool had been built without proper permits or geological inspection, and the limestone terrain beneath it was prone to collapse. The villa owners were arrested for negligence. Khalil Kimi's death shocked Israel. It became a symbol of how human negligence and greed, skipping safety checks for profit, can turn something as innocent as a summer pool party into a fatal disaster. Douglas Harris Crofut. In early 1981, 38-year-old Douglas Harris Crofut, a radiographer from Oklahoma, was found collapsed outside his home, his skin burned, his body covered in sores. Doctors were baffled. It looked like a case of extreme radiation exposure. But how could a man in suburban Tulsa receive such a dose? Crofut worked inspecting pipelines using industrial gamma radiography, a job that involved portable radioactive sources used to detect flaws in metal welds. On some unknown day in late 1980, a source capsule was either mishandled or left unshielded. Crofut may have accidentally carried or slept near the device, long enough to receive a deadly dose of gamma rays. Over the next weeks, his condition worsened. Open sores spread across his body, his hair fell out, and he suffered extreme pain from tissue necrosis. Doctors confirmed the exposure level exceeded 20,000 rem, instantly lethal. Crofut died on February 27, 1981, from radiation poisoning. His case became one of the few recorded instances of a civilian in the United States dying from accidental radiation exposure. The tragedy exposed major flaws in industrial radiation safety, prompting stricter tracking, shielding, and labeling requirements for radiographic sources. Douglas Crofut's death served as a grim reminder that the atomic age's dangers didn't end in laboratories. They followed workers into ordinary industries, unseen but just as lethal. Ian McKeever. On January 2, 2013, 42-year-old Irish mountaineer Ian McKeever led a group of charity climbers up the slopes of Mount Kilimanjaro, Africa's highest peak. A seasoned adventurer and motivational speaker, McKeever had scaled dozens of mountains and once held a record for climbing the 7 summits in record time. That afternoon, as the team neared Harambo Hut, a violent thunderstorm rolled over the mountain. Lightning strikes began to hammer the ridges. At 14,000 feet elevation, there was no shelter. Witnesses say McKeever was at the front of the group when a bolt of lightning struck directly nearby. The current blasted through his body, killing him instantly. Several climbers were knocked unconscious. Others sustained burns. Rescue teams reached the site hours later, carrying his body down through rain and mud. McKeever's death shocked Ireland and the mountaineering community. He had devoted his life to teaching young people about courage, endurance, and pushing past fear, only to be felled by nature's sudden fury. Despite the tragedy, his students and family continued his foundation's work, turning his death into a lesson in respect for nature's unpredictability. As his partner later said, Ian died doing what he loved, standing above the clouds. Aslan Mohad Yassin. On the morning of June 12, 2019, 41-year-old Aslan Mohad Yassin, a factory supervisor at an industrial plant in Johor Bahru, Malaysia, oversaw a team relocating a 20-ton machine. It was routine work, shifting a massive press from one section to another using a wooden carriage and rollers. As the crew maneuvered the load, one of the supports slipped. The towering machine tipped and fell directly onto Aslan. The impact was instant, crushing his chest and pinning him to the concrete floor. His brother and co-workers scrambled to lift the equipment, but it was too heavy. Emergency responders pronounced him dead at the scene. The cause? Massive internal injuries. Authorities launched an investigation, citing poor rigging and a lack of proper lifting equipment. The factory faced safety audits, but the damage was done. A father, supervisor, and friend gone in an instant because safety shortcuts had become normal. In Malaysia, the story became a wake-up call for industrial safety reform. Aslan's death wasn't caused by negligence on a grand scale, just complacency. And that made it all the more haunting.